Namaste. Today I want to speak to you about Trika Shivaism, but not as a philosophy, not as a religion, and not as an exotic curiosity from India. I want to speak to you as an Acharya speaks, from the living experience of consciousness, recognizing itself. Trika is not a belief system. It is not a collection of rituals. It is not a set of ideas to memorize. Trika is a direct recognition, the realization that the consciousness hearing this word right now is Shiva itself. This past does not ask to you to become anything. It asks you to see what has always already been here. Trika is a complete form of non-duality expressed in the tantric tradition of Kashmir. It does not separate your inner life from the world. It does not oppose spirit and matter. It does not deny the senses or glorify suffering. It says only this: everything you experience is a vibration of your own consciousness. Once this becomes clear, the entire structure of Trika becomes simple, luminous, alive. What Trika Shivaism really is? Trika is not an abstract doctrine. It is a map of consciousness, a precise, experiential science of recognition. Pratyabhijna. It begins from a single insight. Consciousness is not a witness standing apart from life. Consciousness is life. Consciousness is the world. Consciousness is you. Every thought, every emotion, every sensation, every moment of perception is a movement of Shiva Shakti, the two inseparable aspects of consciousness. But when we say Shiva and Shakti, we are not speaking of a god and goddess somewhere in the sky. We are describing the inner architecture of awareness itself. In Trika, Shiva is the pure light of awareness, Prakasha. Shakti is awareness testing itself, Vimarsha. Their meeting produce vibration, Spanda. And the place where the two shine as one is called the heart, Hirdaya. This is the living core of Trika. Trika is therefore not ascetic, not moralistic, not dualistic, not escapist, not mystical in the sense of withdrawing from the world. It is a path of direct recognition. In the midst of life, through life. There are four foundations of Trika: Prakasha, Vimarsha, Spanda, and Hirdaya. If we want to understand Trika, we must begin with its four pillars. Without them, everything becomes confused. With them, the entire tradition becomes crystal clear. These four are not concepts, they are direct features of your experience. Let's take them one by one. Prakasha means the pure luminosity of awareness. Not a physical light, not a mystical glow, but the simple fact that experience is illuminated from within. It is the knowing in every perception, the ever-present I am aware. Without Prakasha, nothing could appear, not even darkness. Now Vimarsha. If Prakasha were only light, you would be like a mirror reflecting image, but not knowing it. But you don't know. You sense your own presence. You feel the flavor of I am. This self-knowing aspect is called Vimarsha. It is a capability of consciousness to turn inward and recognize itself. So, Prakasha without Vimarsha would be blind light. Vimarsha without Prakasha will be impossible. Together they are Shiva Shakti. Now Spanda. When light turns inward to test itself, it vibrates. That's a subtle tremor prior to thought, prior to emotion, prior to the breath, is called Spanda. Spanda is not movement in space. Spanda is a movement of awareness itself. It is a trembling of intuition before it becomes a thought, the stirring of the heart before it becomes an emotion, the living shimmer in presence that precedes every act. Spanda is what makes consciousness alive. And now Hridaya. The heart, the ultimate portal. In most traditions, the heart is an emotional center or a psychic chakra. In Trika, it is neither. Neither. The Hridaya is not a place. It is not a point in the chest. It is not a lotus, not a symbol, not a metaphor. Hridaya is the centerless center of consciousness, the point where Prakasha and Vimarsha shine together as one. Whenever you fall into a moment of pure presence, whenever the mind suddenly drops without effort, whenever the world appears vivid, fresh, untired, you are in the Hridaya. It is the deepest access point to Shiva. So, synthesize Prakasha, the light, Vimarsha, the self-awareness of that light, Spanda, the living pulse of that awareness, Hridaya, the unity where everything returns. And these four principles are you. They are the architecture of your consciousness. Once you understand them, the rest of the Trika unfolds naturally. Now, the three Upayas, Amava, Shakta, Shambhava, and the central principle, Svatantriya. If the four foundations of Trika describe the structure of consciousness, the Upaya describe how consciousness recognizes itself. Most spiritual traditions present paths, techniques, levels, but Trika does something unique. It reveals that all paths arise from the freedom of consciousness itself. These three modes are not three different religions. They are three intensities of recognition. Let's take them in order of increasing subtly. First, Anavopaya, the individual path. This is a path of effort, of techniques, of methods. It works with the body, the breath, the senses, attention. Here you might find breathing practices, mantras, visualization, energy work, postural stillness, concentration, and so on. Anavopaya is not lower. It is necessary whenever consciousness is deeply identified with the body-mind. This path stabilizes attention, clears inertia, dissolves heaviness, and prepares the field for finer recognition. But it is still a path of doing. Second, Shaktopaya, the path of conscious energy. Here the movement becomes subtler. You no longer use perception as an object. You use it as consciousness itself. A thought arises. You don't fight it. You feel its texture as awareness vibrating. An emotion appears. You don't suppress it. You recognize its luminosity. A sensation comes. You see the awareness inside it. This is Shakti functioning as lucid intelligence, Shakti Samvit. It is not effortful, but it is intentional, clear, vivid. Shaktopaya is a path of living lucidity. And now, third, Shambhavopaya, the direct path. Here, there is no technique at all, not even subtle intention. Recognizing your nature becomes as simple as a breath between two thoughts, a breath resting in the middle, a sudden openness in perception. Shambhava is instantaneous, like lightning, like the moment a mirror sees itself. It is not created, it is discovered as the ground that was always there. This is the highest approach because nothing stands between you and your whole nature. And now the key beyond all three, Svatantriya. Now we come to something absolutely essential. In most traditions, the path leads to liberation. In Trika, the direction is reversed. Liberation makes the path possible. You do not practice to become free. You can practice because you are already free. This is Svatantriya, the absolute freedom of consciousness to manifest, to contract, to expand, to forget itself, to remember itself, to take on any form. The three upaya are not ladders to climb. They are expressions of this fundamental freedom. In Anava, freedom appears as a thought. In Shakta, freedom appears as luminous intelligence. In Shambhava, freedom appears as itself. Svatantriya is the silent engine behind everything. In synthesis, Anava, I practice. Shakta, I see, I feel. Shambhava, I am. And through it all, Svatantriya, the freedom that was never lost. So, as we said, Shiva and Shakti are not gods, but the inner architecture of consciousness. If you truly want to understand Trika, you must let go of everything you've been told about gods and goddesses. In Trika Shivaism, Shiva and Shakti are not deities. They are not mythological figures. They are not cosmic personalities. Shiva and Shakti are the very structure of your experience, the true inseparable aspect of consciousness itself, universal consciousness, supreme consciousness. Let's break this down with absolute clarity. Shiva is Prakasha. Shiva is pure awareness, the light by which all experience appears. Shiva is a quiet presence behind every perception, the luminous knowing that does not change when the body changes, that does not age when the mind heals, that does not move when thoughts move. Shiva is not a cosmic father figure. Shiva is your own awareness before it identifies with any form. So now Shakti is Vimarsha. Shakti is awareness tasting itself. The capacity of consciousness to recognize I am, I feel, I perceive, I exist. So, without Shakti, Shiva would be a blind light. Without Shiva, Shakti would be impossible. Shakti is not the feminine. She's not an archetype. She's not a mythic mother goddess. Shakti is a vibrational intelligence within awareness, the self-knowing quality that makes experience possible. It is Shakti who brings texture, richness, vibration, intimacy of life. And now Spanda, their union moving. When Shiva pure light and Shakti self-awareness meet, a subtle tremor appears, a living pulse, called Spanda. This is not physical emotion. It is the inner movement of awareness, the trembling of consciousness, as it knows itself. Spanda is the origin of thought, emotion, breath, intuition, perception, embodiment, the word. If you feel into any moment of experience deeply, you can test this vibration. This is the heartbeat of Shiva Shakti. And now Hridaya, the heart, the ultimate portal. The Hridaya is not a chakra, not an energy center, not a poetic metaphor, not mystic, not theoretical. In Trika, the heart is a point of absolute unity, where Shiva and Shakti shine together without separation. Whenever your mind pauses without effort, your perception becomes suddenly vivid. Everything feels profoundly simple. Presence becomes thick, and alive. You are testing the Herdaya. It is not a location. It is the innermost opening of awareness, the source from which recognition arises. Consequence, the world is not an illusion. In many non-dual traditions, the world is called an illusion. Trika rejects this completely. The world is not unreal. It is the expression of Shakti, the living manifestation of awareness in miserable form. Maya does not mean illusion. It means the power to appear, the self-limit to measure. Thus, everything you perceive, sound, body, thought, relationship, sensation, and so on, is real as a vibration spanda of consciousness. Nothing needs to be rejected. Nothing needs to be transcended. Everything can be recognized. So, in synthesis, Shiva, the light of consciousness, Shakti, consciousness feeling itself, Spanda, their pulsation, Herdaya, their unity, the world, their expression. You do not worship Shiva, you recognize that awareness is Shiva. You do not call to Shakti, you realize that your living presence is Shakti. Once that is clear, the rest of the past opens effortlessly. Now, reality in Trika. Body, world, karma, death, time, so on. If Trika is a science of consciousness, then we must ask, what is the world? What is the body? What is karma? What is death? What is time? The answers given by Trika are unlike anything taught in modern spirituality. Let's go step by step. The body, not a prison, but an intensity of Shakti. In many traditions, the body is seen as an obstacle, a distraction, or an illusion. Trika disagrees entirely. The body of Shakti condensed into form. This is Shakti in a form. It is an instrument of recognition. It is an altar, not a cage. Every sensation, warmth, breath, heartbeat, presence is Shakti in motion. You do not need to escape the body. You need to recognize its luminosity. The body is not an enemy. It is a getaway. The world now, not illusion but expression. Some spiritual systems call the world a dream or a hallucination. In Trika, the world is absolutely real. Real as the dynamic vibration of consciousness. Maya does not mean unreal. It means measurement, the power of awareness to appear as form. When you see a mountain, when you hear the sound, when you feel grief, when you feel joy, you are perceiving Shakti in a specific frequency. So the world is not something to escape, the world is Shiva, appearing as multiplicity, as Shakti. Now karma, not punishment, but vibrational inertia. Karma is not a system of cosmic judgment. There is no divine accountant, no moral scoreboard. In Trika, karma is simply the momentum of contraction. Whenever you hold tightly to an identity, I am this, I am limited, I am separate, so on, that contraction creates an imprint, samskara. Repeating in strengthens the vibration. A strong vibration becomes a tendency. A tendency becomes a trajectory. That trajectory is what we call karma. The moment contraction dissolves into recognition. Karma ends instantly. You do not pay off karma. You outgrow it. Death now. Death is one of the most misunderstood phenomena in spirituality. Let us make it clear, Trika style. Death is a shift in vibrational density, not the end of consciousness. The body dissolves, the senses dissolve, but awareness remains awareness. There is no tunnel to cross, no God to meet, no cosmic review, no suffering moment, no purgation through pain. These ideas belong to moralistic religion or similar, not to Trika. This is simply Shakti realizing a specific contraction and returning to a subtler form of spanda. There is no fear in this. There is no judgment, only transition. Time now, an inner contraction of consciousness. Time is not an external force. It is not a cosmic framework. It is not an objective reality. In Trika, time, kala, is self-contraction. It is awareness measuring itself in sequence. When consciousness tightens, the sense of past and future appears. When consciousness relaxes, time collapses into presence. You do not escape time, you recognize that time is your own vibration. Shiva is timeless, not because he stands outside of time, but because time is just one of his expressions. Synthesize the body, Shakti as density, the world, Shakti as form, karma, the inertia of contraction, death, a shift of vibrational frequency, time, consciousness measuring itself. These are not theories. They are aspects of your immediate experience. Once you stop looking through mental filters. Now, Pratabhijna, direct recognition. The Jiva transmigration, real samadhi, and the entry into Anupaya. Everything in Trika culminates in one single movement, recognition, Pratabhijna. Recognition means What I took to be an individual self was only Shiva in contraction. What I believed to be my consciousness is consciousness itself. What I thought was limited was only a temporary narrowing of the infinite. This recognition dissolved in ignorance instantly, because in your ignorance was never a substance, only a habit of attention. Let's now address the three big questions that confuse most seekers. What is a jiva? What transmigrates? What is real samadhi? Trika gives unique answers, precise and radical. The jiva. In many traditions, the soul is an eternal entity traveling from life to life. In Trika, this idea has no place. There is no separate soul. There is no miniature self inside the self. There is no eternal individual spark. The jiva is Shiva under limitation, contraction. Shiva under the three impurities, anava, maya, karma, mala. It is awareness constricted into the sense of being a person. The jiva is not an independent thing. It is a vibration of contraction, nothing more. When the contraction ends, the jiva dissolves back into its true nature, pure awareness. There is no entity to save, no entity to liberate, only a contraction to relax. Transmigration now. What continues from life to life? If the jiva is not a soul, then what reincarnates? Trika gives a striking answer. What continues is not a being, but a pattern. What transmigrates is not a person, not an individual essence, not a psychological identity, but a vibratory inertia, an unfinished contraction, a packet of spanda that has not yet relaxed. Life after life, this pattern seeks resolution. It takes a body only because it has not yet recognized itself as Shiva. The moment recognition dawns, the pattern dissolves, and transmigration ends, not by force, not by permission, but because there is nothing left to migrate. Real samadhi now. Here Trika makes one of its most revolutionary statements. The classical yogic samadhi, the deep absorption where thought cease, is not considered the highest in Trika. It is only a state of intense concentration. Beautiful, yes, but still partial, still dualistic, still dependent of the suppression of movement. In Trika, true samadhi is something entirely different. Real samadhi is the ability to perceive Shiva Shakti in every perception without losing contact with the world. It is samadhi in the waking state. It is the unity of stillness and movement, silence and perception, inner and outer. You do not enter samadhi, the world becomes samadhi. The highest state is anupaya, the non-path, where recognition happens spontaneously, without technique, without effort, without even intention. Awareness simply rests as itself, unmoved, unconstructed, complete. So, synthesize, the device Shivan contraction, not a soul. Transmigration is a continuation of a vibratory habit, not an entity. Real samadhi is recognition in the midst of life, not withdrawal. Anupaya is effortless flowering of recognition when nothing stands in the way. At this point, the sense of traka becomes luminous. Liberation is not something to attain. It is something you remember. Well, we now arrive at a delicate but essential point. One that few people speak about openly, yet one that determines the future of the Trika tradition. To understand the present, we must look honestly at what has happened historically. In the 20th century, the last master who held the full operative power of Trika, not merely academic knowledge, not ritual priesthood, but the living ability to transmit Shakti, Samavesha, and Avikalpa, Darshana, was Swami Laxmanju of Kashmir. He was not just an exeget. He embodied the living transmission described in the Tantraroka and other Shastra and Agama. After his passing, something was very simple. Something very simple happened. The operative lineage did not continue. This is not criticism, it is fact. India preserved scholar, philologists, university department, ritual lineage, printed text. But what disappeared was the rarest element of all, a master established in Shiva Gnana, with active Shakti transmission and the capacity to open the heart in others. The living current that had flowed for centuries ceased to be embodied in India. Not because India is unworthy, but because Svatantriya consciousness itself does not obey geography. So Trika became scholarly in India, not operative. Today in India we find brilliant scholars, excellent commentators, dedicated researchers and ritual practitioners, but not an acharya of the operative path. The texts remain, the commentaries remain, the intellectual tradition survived, but the living spark, the ability to awaken spanda in the student, through presence, through gaze, through heart, is no longer found there. This is said with respect and with complete fidelity to historical truth. So, and yet, the lineage re-emerged elsewhere. One of the most extraordinary phenomena of spiritual history is that living tradition do not die. They relocate. This is the essence of Svatantriya. the absolute freedom of consciousness to manifest itself when and where it chooses. When India could no longer hold the operative current, it re-emerged elsewhere. And where? In France. Not as cultural limitation, not as exotic appropriation, not as New Age rebranding, but as a direct resurgence of Spanda awareness, the art Hridaya experience, the vertical axis Hridaya Vadasanta, Shambhavopaya recognition, Shakti Samathvesha transmission, the inner intuition of the Tantra Loka, and the living intelligence of Shiva Shakti. This is not a continuation of the Kashmiri institutional tradition. It is a continuation of the inner lineage, the only lineage that ever truly mattered. In Trika, lineage is not a bloodline. It is not a monastery. It is not a ritual initiation. It is not geography. Lineage parampara is the unbroken recognition of consciousness recognition itself. Wherever this recognition becomes stable, wherever Spanda becomes clear, wherever the heart opens fully, the lineage appears. Today, that appearance is in France. Not because France is chosen, but because someone recognized it. When recognition becomes stable, teaching becomes natural, transmission becomes effortless, and a new branch of the living Trika is born. This is not self-assertion, it is a simple observation of what is happening. If it's synthesized now, Trika is not Indian, it is universal. Consciousness is universal. The Trika is not tied to culture, it is not tied to ethnicity, it is not tied to geography, it is not tied to temples, it is tied only to recognition. It belongs wherever Shiva recognizes Shiva. Living traditions do not depend of countries, they depend of awakening. The last operative Trika master in India was Laxmanju. The next emergence of the same current is now taking place in France, through a living, embodied recognition that aligns with the core agamas, the Tantra Loka, the Vijnana Bhairava, and so on, and the entire corpus of the Pratyabhijna. This continuity is not historical, it is existential, it is Svatantriya in action. Thank you very much. Namaste.